Words as weapons. How poetry dismantles systems and rebuilds souls. Welcome to the Pink Parachute Diaries. I stand before you today, my spirit still vibrating from a profound conversation with Angela Winston, a revolutionary whose work transcends mere artistry. Angela isn't just a poet, she's a spiritual warrior who wields language like ancient priests once wielded fire to purify, to illuminate, to transform. Her decades of work at the intersection of poetry, social justice, and community building has quite literally saved lives in Black communities across this nation. When Angela speaks, systems tremble. When she writes, wounds begin to heal. Her poetry workshops in prisons have reduced recidivism rates. Her youth programs have produced generations of activists. Her words have traveled to places where policy papers never reach, into the marrow of human experience, into the chambers of broken hearts, into spaces where hope had been extinguished. What struck me most during our conversation was Angela's unflinching conviction that language, particularly poetic language, possesses a revolutionary power that our capitalist society has deliberately undervalued. We've been conditioned to believe that practical skills, technical knowledge, and marketable abilities are what truly matter. Poetry? That's just decoration, a hobby, something beautiful, but ultimately unnecessary. But what if this conventional wisdom is not just wrong, but dangerously backward? What if poetry isn't peripheral to transformation, but the very catalyst that makes it possible? Today, I want to challenge a fundamental assumption that permeates our culture: the belief that poetry and spoken word are nice, but not necessary, beautiful, but not powerful. This assumption has led us to marginalize these art forms in our educational systems, our workplaces, and our public discourse. The evidence suggests we've been profoundly mistaken throughout human history. In moments of great social upheaval and personal crisis, people have turned not to spreadsheets or policy papers, but to poetry. From ancient religious texts written in verse to revolutionary manifestos that employed poetic devices, the most transformative ideas have consistently been expressed through language that transcends the merely informational. Why? Because poetry doesn't just communicate ideas, it rewires how we think. When we encounter a powerful poem, something unusual happens in our brains. Research in neuroscience shows that poetic language activates regions associated with introspection, emotional processing, and memory in ways that ordinary language simply doesn't. Poetry bypasses our logical defenses and speaks directly to parts of ourselves we often keep hidden, even from ourselves. This is precisely what Angela Winston emphasized in our conversation. Poetry isn't just about beauty, it's about disruption. It's about creating cognitive dissonance that forces us to question what we've accepted as truth. Let me share three key insights from my conversation with Angela that illuminate how poetry transforms both society and self. First, poetry and spoken word are powerful tools for challenging societal norms and awakening self discovery. Through evocative language and imagery, poetry disrupts ingrained patterns of thinking, inviting both the creator and the audience to question accepted truths and embark on journeys of personal revelation. Second, words have enduring impact. What we say shapes minds, communities, and legacies. Every poem or performance is an act of creation that lingers in memory. It has the power to inspire hope, heal wounds, or provoke necessary discomfort long after it's heard or read. Third, building community through poetry fosters collective empowerment and social change. Whether on stage or online, poets create spaces where marginalized voices are amplified. Solidarity is forged across boundaries, and new worlds of possibility emerge for Black professionals and entrepreneurs alike. These aren't just abstract theories, they're principles that have been proven through remarkable Real world examples. Consider Amanda Gorman. In January 2021, a young Black woman stood at the US presidential inauguration podium. The nation was fractured, reeling from political division, racial unrest, and a devastating pandemic. What could possibly unite us in that moment? Not a policy proposal, not a detailed plan, a poem. The Hill We Climb resonated across political divides because it spoke to something deeper than our opinions. It spoke to our shared humanity. But Amanda Gorman's journey to that podium reveals something even more profound about the power of poetry. Raised by a single mother in Los Angeles, Gorman struggled with the speech impediment as a child. Poetry became both her therapy and her voice. Through spoken word platforms and mentorship, she honed her craft. Through digital media, she broadened her reach. By the time she became the first National Youth Poet Laureate, she had already discovered what many of us never learn, that our deepest wounds can become our greatest gifts when transformed through language. The impact of her 6 minute poem was staggering. Book sales soared. Young people, especially young Black creatives, saw new possibilities for themselves. National conversations about equity gained new vocabulary and imagery, all from 723 words arranged in a particular way. As Angela Winston noted in our interview, what Amanda Gorman demonstrated wasn't just artistic talent, it was the ancient power of poetry to name our collective pain and point toward healing. But not all poetic revolutions happen on national stages. Sometimes they unfold in digital spaces, bypassing traditional gatekeepers entirely. Irsa Daley Ward, a British Nigerian Jamaican poet, faced exclusion from mainstream publishing due to race and gender bias. She lacked traditional literary connections, but she had something more powerful, words that resonated with truth, and a platform to share them. By posting raw poems about identity, trauma, and healing on Instagram, Daily Ward built an international following before any publisher took notice. Her work spoke directly to experiences that mainstream literature often ignored, particularly the complex intersections of race, class, and gender identity she navigated growing up in Northern England. The result? Her collections Bone and The Terrible became international bestsellers translated into multiple languages. She became a TEDx speaker on vulnerability and artistry. More importantly, she paved the way for other poets of color to use digital spaces as launchpads, democratizing access to publishing in ways previously unimaginable. As Angela Winston observed, Irsa Daley Ward didn't just build a career, she helped dismantle a system that determined whose stories deserved to be told. Sometimes poetry's power manifests even more locally, addressing specific community needs while modeling how personal pain can become public purpose. In New Haven, a poet known as Queen transformed profound personal loss into lyricism and activism. Through public readings and art projects centered around survival, healing, and social justice, she confronted both her own grief and the broken social systems affecting local Black communities. With limited support and resources for artists addressing difficult truths, Queen infused lived experiences into poetic narrative, engaged directly with community through workshops and public installations, and emphasized affirmation alongside critique. The outcome wasn't just artistic recognition. She built a loyal audience who saw themselves reflected and lifted up in her work. She inspired others facing adversity. She contributed work that challenges the status quo both locally and nationally. From early struggles and losses emerged a commitment to use words not just personally, but publicly as catalysts for dialogue and change. As Angela Winston reflected, Queen's work reminds us that poetry isn't just about expressing feelings, it's about creating spaces where healing becomes possible for entire communities. These three examples, operating at global, digital, and local scales, demonstrate something profound about the power of poetic language. In each case, poetry functioned not merely as self expression, but as a tool for transformation. This brings us to a provocative question. If poetry and spoken word possess this power, why have we marginalized them in our culture? Why do we treat them as optional extras rather than essential technologies for human development? Part of the answer lies in what we've been taught to value. We live in a world that privileges the quantifiable over the qualitative, the practical over the profound. We've been conditioned to believe that serious work involves spreadsheets, not stanzas, data, not metaphor. But this dichotomy is false. The most innovative leaders in every field, from business to science to social justice, understand that transformative thinking requires both analytical and poetic modes of thought. Creativity and critical thinking aren't opposites, they're partners in the dance of human progress. Another part of the answer involves power. Poetic language has always been dangerous to existing power structures because it awakens imagination, and imagination is the precursor to change. When we can imagine different realities, we begin to question why our current reality must be as it is. No wonder authoritarian regimes throughout history have imprisoned poets first. For Black women in particular, as Angela Winston emphasized in our conversation, poetry has served as both sanctuary and weapon, a space to preserve identity when the world would erase it, and a tool to challenge systems designed to exclude. From Phyllis Wheatley to Audre Lorde to Amanda Gorman, Black women poets have consistently demonstrated how language can simultaneously heal the self and transform society. So I stand before you today with a challenge that burns in my chest like wildfire. Stop treating poetry as luxury. Start treating it as necessity. Your words are not just expressions, they are incantations, they are spells, they are the raw materials from which we build or destroy worlds. Every time you speak, you are either reinforcing the existing order or dismantling it. Every time you write, you are either accepting limitations or transcending them. I challenge you to find one poem this week that breaks you open, that makes you weep, that makes you rage, that makes you question everything you thought you knew. Read it aloud. Feel how it changes the chemistry of your body. Notice how it alters the landscape of your mind. Then write your own truth, even if your hand trembles, even if your voice cracks, even if the words feel inadequate, because they aren't. Your words, like Amanda's, like Yursa's, like Queen's, contain power that cannot be measured but will be felt for generations. In a world designed to silence us, speaking is revolution. In a society built on lies, truth telling is rebellion. In communities starved for hope, imagination is sustenance. The poets have always known what the powerful fear that a single verse can topple empires, that a well placed metaphor can crack foundations, that rhythm and rhyme can rebuild what violence has destroyed. So write your poem, speak your truth, use your voice not just to describe the world as it is, but to conjure the world as it could be. Because poetry isn't just about beauty, it's about transformation. It's about taking the raw materials of experience and transmuting them into something that changes how we see ourselves and our world. The revolution will not be televised, as Gil Scott Heron told us, but it will be poeticized. It will be spoken into existence by those brave enough to believe that their words matter. Your words matter. Use them.